Literary genres and movements. Exploring different literary genres, modernism, postmodernism. 1. Example. Analyzing the modernist elements in T.S. Eliot's poetry and contrasting them with postmodernist features in the works of Salman Rushdie. Studying literary movements and their impact. 1. Example. Examining the impact of the Harlem Renaissance on African American literature and culture in the early 20th century. Understanding the historical and cultural context of literary works. 1. Example. Understanding how the Victorian-era's social norms and values influence the themes in the novels of Charles Dickens. Cultural studies. Examining literature as a reflection of culture. 1. Example. Examining how the portrayal of family dynamics in Asian literature reflects cultural values and traditions. Analyzing cultural shifts and their representation in literature. 1. Example. Analyzing how the Beat generation's literature reflects the cultural shifts and countercultural movements of the 1950s and 1960s. Discussing the intersectionality of culture, identity, and literature. 1. Example. Discussing the intersectionality of race, gender, and class in the portrayal of characters in Toni Morrison's novels. Advanced rhetoric and persuasion. Mastering rhetorical devices for effective communication. 1. Example. Using rhetorical devices such as parallelism and antithesis to enhance the persuasive impact of a political speech. Analyzing persuasive techniques in speeches and texts. 1. Example. Analyzing Martin Luther King Jr.'s use of ethos, pathos, and logos in his "I Have a Dream" speech. Creating compelling and nuanced arguments. 1. Example. Crafting an argumentative essay that presents a nuanced perspective on the ethical implications of genetic engineering. Media and information literacy. Critically analyzing media sources and messages. 1. Example. Critically analyzing news articles to identify potential biases and misinformation. Understanding media bias and propaganda. 1. Example. Investigating the influence of political bias in media coverage of global events. Navigating and interpreting complex information sources. 1. Example. Navigating scientific journals to extract relevant information for a research paper on climate change. Advanced public speaking and debate. Participating in formal debates on complex topics. 1. Example. Engaging in a formal debate on the ethical implications of artificial intelligence in healthcare. Delivering persuasive and informative speeches. 1. Example. Delivering a persuasive speech on the importance of renewable energy adoption for environmental sustainability. Engaging in advanced public speaking techniques. 1. Example. Incorporating rhetorical questions and audience engagement techniques in a keynote address on leadership. Global literature. Exploring literature from around the world. 1. Example. Exploring the themes of displacement and identity in the works of contemporary Middle Eastern authors. Studying works in translation. 1. Example. Studying Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude in translation to appreciate its impact on global literature. Understanding the global impact of literature. 1. Example. Analyzing how the works of African diasporic writers contribute to a global understanding of cultural heritage and identity. Professional and technical communication. Writing professional documents, reports, proposals, manuals. 1. Example. Drafting a comprehensive technical manual for a software product aimed at both technical and non-technical users. Developing technical writing skills. 1. Example. Developing technical documentation for a scientific experiment, ensuring clarity and precision in conveying complex procedures. Communicating effectively in professional settings. 1. Example. Delivering a concise and impactful presentation to stakeholders outlining the strategic goals and outcomes of a business initiative.